I have mentioned Herman Daly's name a lot of times. He was a well-known economist who I think passed away just recently. His main idea was to say, don't think of environment as something separate from society and economy. If you remember original ideas of sustainability, we used to show a circle for the environment, circle for society, circle for economy, and say they intersected over sustainability. But he suggested that we should put everything within the environment, and the more we want to exploit it, the less space we will have to save it and to save ourselves. So this idea is now discussed in a slightly different context here by Bob Costanza, who's another famous guy for working a lot all his life on sustainability issues, ecosystem services, and how to value nature, etc. So this is a short opinion. This images of protesters in New York City in September that joined thousands of others around the world in urging governments to act on climate change. The paper is from December 23, so this is 23 September. To build a better world, stop chasing economic growth. What do we mean? This was the argument made by Herman Daly as well, that there's a big difference between economic growth and economic development. I won't go into too many details because I've discussed this already elsewhere. So let's just focus on what Bob Costanza has to say. The year 2024 must be a turning point for shifting policies away from gross domestic product and towards sustainable well-being. Here is why and how. So well-being, as you know, is slightly different than health, even though it's part of health. Well-being is where you are feeling good enough, optimistic enough, energetic enough to do something, and you are able to do something. So your performance, your productivity, your thinking, everything is in full power when you have high well-being. And a lot of indirect things can affect your well-being, like climate anxiety. The past year has given many of us reason to pause. We are losing a race to prevent planetary tipping points. The climate is changing faster than expected, and humanity has already breached 6 of the 9 sustainable planetary boundaries. One of them is biodiversity loss, climate, freshwater, land system change, biogeochemical flows, and novel entities. Tipping points is a debate that I've had, I discuss it elsewhere. You can look it up. These are, there are tipping points in the Earth system, but how close are we to tipping over? What does it mean when we say we have breached the sustainability planetary boundary for biodiversity loss? These are hard to quantify, so you have to do your own homework to see what you think of that. Summer Antarctic sea ice shrank to its lowest record to its lowest recorded extent in 2023, a year that is on track to be the warmest on record. Okay, that's for sure, because now, as I'm recording this in September 2024, the each month was warmer than before in 2023, or each month broke a record in 2023 and 2024, but now we have turned the corner on that one. People around the world recognize that life is not getting any better as wars rage, runaway inequality, and political polarization are eroding society's sense of cohesion. 8 individuals owned more than the poorest 50% of the world population, according to an Oxfam report in 2017. Levels of anxiety, depression, and burnout are rocketing. Full-time employees are unable to pay rent and must turn to extra part-time work to make ends meet, while employers cut staff and increase workloads. Lots of claims. Is there data for all these things? Well, you just want to take the message that we are heading into this unstable, not a calm period, let's say, because a lot of people are feeling anxious about many things, especially when you have political choices being made that are not making sense. You have leaders who are running for elections who say strange things and so on. This is the Beyond Growth conference in Brussels in May 2023, which concluded with a call to create a sustainable and just economy. How do we do that? Well, that's a long story. Crises are now normal in this global economic system that depletes natural and social capital, energy and time in the name of economic growth at all costs. Again, these are claims. What does it mean? You have to figure it out. But looking to 2024, I'm hopeful that the world can turn in a better direction. For example, a meeting I attended in May on sustainable prosperity particularly buoyed my spirits and, in my view, signaled a tipping point in thinking and governance. Well, there we go with a tipping point again, because now I'm recording this in 2024 and I don't see any tipping point coming along that'll make this world a better place, because sustainable prosperity is a nice concept, but how do we actually make it happen? How do we make sure it's just and equitable as well? Maybe that's sustainable prosperity includes this as an intrinsic requirement, but the Beyond Growth conference at the European Parliament attracted more than 2,500 participants in person as well as 2,000 online. It was sponsored by the European Commission and the Club of Rome, a non-profit organization fostering research and action around pressing global issues. So 4,500 people got together, and meetings attract people. People love to attend meetings. Can they create a tipping point? Will the tipping point really start making visible, quantifiable, sustainable changes? We have to wait and see. So what are the ideas by from Bob Costanza? I'm sounding a bit cynical because I agree with the basic idea that we need to stop chasing economic growth as the holy grail for making life better. And there is a big difference between economic growth and economic development. And sustainability is a concept that has, very soothing, intuitive sense. But how to make it happen in reality is a great challenge. Okay, design better measures of societal well-being. Okay, you want to track societal well-being. There are also now requirements of ESG for corporation, environmental, societal and governance and so on, and that is already a fight against it, and people even blame ESG for bank failures and so on and so forth. So you do one thing and then there are 10 other things that happen automatically. So well-being is a concept. There are metrics to measure it, but we need to actually track them. Hundreds of indicators of societal well-being are already in use, including by the United Nations, the World Bank, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, non-governmental organizations, countries and academics, which means that it's not very uniquely defined. Okay, examples include the Genuine Progress Indicator, the OECD Better Life Index, and annual surveys of life satisfaction. To become a societal goal used by all and to displace GDP, gross domestic product, the world must settle on a new indicator. Broad consensus is needed on what should be included. So having indicators is always useful because you can track them and make sure you are making progress. But with so many indices already around, is there any way that people will give up GDP as a basic measure of economy? There is, the idea of gross happiness index and so on, which they sound nice, but, not practical in many ways. For example, it's not just income that matters, but also the ways in which it is distributed. The cost of environmental and social degradation must be included, as should contributors to well-being that are unconnected to income. This is key. Well-being is often not related to money in the bank or incomes. This should include our relationships and communities, good governance, the ability to participate in decision making, and ecosystem services provided by the natural environment. So I mentioned ecosystem services before, which is one of Bob's favorite things. Several research initiatives are beginning to address these issues, including one I'm involved with called MERGE, which is funded by the European Union. European Union is very progressive in thinking about things, but climate action, sustained climate action, is tricky because they now put heavy tariffs on EVs, electric vehicles from China. Why? Because that's a competition to their manufacturers. So, we are always doing fancy dances, so don't believe everything. Model the complex dynamics of the economic system as a second point. Interactions between social, economic, and natural elements of societal well-being must be better modeled and future projections developed to assess their sustainability. National examples include the Euro Green model, which has been applied to France, and the low grow model of the Canadian ecological economy. Okay, so there are other models that I won't read, but here, for example, rather than rewarding the fossil fuel sector with enormous subsidies to maintain economic growth at the expense of climate and social disruption, new policies would focus on moving away from fossil fuels. At the same time, policies to achieve the other four turnaround areas would be implemented to enable sustainable well-being regardless of the effects on the GDP. Well, these are big claims. First of all, we are not in a position to just phase out fossil fuel because the system is still very much a carbon system. It's called carbon trap by many. I have podcasts on carbon trap elsewhere you can look up. And are we really going to do anything regardless of the effect on GDP? No way, right? Like banning, sometimes banning of EVs or putting heavy tariffs on EVs from China by the US and European Union are clear examples of how even the most progressive advocates of climate action quickly do something that is definitely bad for GDP if they don't do it. So it's bad for the environment but protects the GDP. Develop policies to support sustainable well-being. The EU and the Well-being Economy Governments the EU and the Well-being Economy Governments Group that includes Scotland, New Zealand, Wales, Finland, Canada, and Iceland have begun to implement measures of sustainable well-being and policies to achieve them. You also have to think about countries. If they are small, homogeneous countries, rich countries, their problems are very different than big, diverse and developing countries like China and India. So already what they can do and what others can do will be very different. Researchers need to analyze these plans and offer lessons to help other nations adopt them. What are these policies? There are many versions. I will skip the details, but there are many versions. But an open letter I signed in May, together with more than 400 leading economists, scientists, and policymakers and activists, provides starting points in 4 areas. These are biocapacity, so protecting the planet, kind of like the carrying capacity of the planet, which has been around for a while. Fairness, a more equal society, well-being for all, basic services and rights, and active democracy. Okay, well, you can go and look up this document on Beyond Growth Policies, but again, democracy is active and functional in many countries, but it is throwing up crazy people into power. What do you do then, right? So democracy is not a cure-all. Specific policies will have to be tailored for a broad range of contexts. They will need to overturn and overcome opposition from vested interests that are maintaining the current system, including billionaires, the fossil fuel sector, big pharma, the defense industry, and the industrial agriculture. For example, perverse subsidies for damaging practices across these sectors must be removed. Collective actions through movements of movements will be essential for bypassing lobbying and misinformation. Excellent ideas. How to implement is not always clear. Build a shared vision. Constructing a sustainable world where well-being is prioritized must be a key goal for 2024 and beyond. Very good idea. At the societal scale, people need a positive shared vision of goals that can achieve sustainable well-being. Very good idea. Often you need leaders who can get people to think collectively in a positive direction. Very easy to get crazy people who will lead conspiracy theories and lead people to think negatively and depress everybody, make everybody pessimistic. To motivate change, techniques must be borrowed from therapies for addictive behaviors such as motivational interviewing, which engages people who have addictions in a positive discussion of their life goals. I agree. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, which were agreed by all countries in 2015 Paris Agreement, are one step in the process, but they have not been fully embraced by governments and are largely unknown to the public. So countries make, sign on to agreements, but implementation, monitoring, reporting, verification is very difficult when you have so many socio-political perturbations and perturbations to GDPs. To change that, researchers, activists and policymakers need to develop creative ways to engage people. For example, those in the arts and humanities could create positive visions of what life would look like in a world where the SDGs have been achieved. I love positive visions for the future, especially for the kids. You cannot keep telling them climate change is going to destroy the world. That's not good for anybody, because climate change is actually doing a lot of things, but the planet is not going anywhere. The world is not coming to an end. We just need to work diligently on solutions like we did for vaccines during COVID. This could help motivate the movement of movements and other changes needed to overcome the addiction to GDP growth. People often fear that such transformations will require sacrifices. In the short term, change is difficult and addictions are powerful. But in the long run, it's a huge sacrifice of our personal and societal well-being. To continue down the business as usual path, sustainable well-being can improve the lives of everyone and protect the biodiversity and ecosystem services on which we all depend. In the coming year, let's continue to build the shared vision of the world we all want and accelerate progress towards it. Okay, so beyond growth policies, here it is. I did include it, I forgot. This is getting a bit long, but it's okay. An open letter signed by more than 400 experts in May suggested legislation based on 4 principles that would overcome the world addiction to growth in gross domestic product: biocapacity, fairness, well-being for all, and active democracy. We just mentioned it, but there are a few more details here. For example, active democracy, citizen assemblies could be set up with mandates to formulate socially acceptable sufficiency strategies and strengthen policies. These would be based on ecological limits, fairness and well-being for all, and include a stronger role for trade unions. Examples include local needs forums, climate conventions, and participatory budgeting. Excellent idea, but with so many interests, so many socio-political issues, how will it work? How will we actually make it happen? The optimism is today, just start and let it grow, and I would agree with that. I would definitely join a citizen assembly focused on these ideas. Okay, so you read it again in detail. I skipped some of the text. You read the ideas, you decide for yourself the pros, the cons, the barriers, the gaps, the real vested interests that don't let these things happen, and so on. But development versus growth is a fundamental idea that I agree with. Okay, see you in the next topic.